I will give you the floor, and then we'll take some questions.
Terrific. And many thanks, Steph, for having me back, and colleagues for giving me some time today. I look forward to the questions. I'll try and be as brief as possible so we can get into the higher protein exchange I'm sure that we'll have ahead of us. I'll make just some general comments about where we are on particularly humanitarian reform, and as a sector, I can give you headlines on some of the major crises that are currently, and I assume will be in the future, crossing my desk, and then very happy to open up. So to start with High Level Week, for which obviously we're deep into the preparations. I think that maybe this is something that new people or newish people always say, but I think this is the most significant high-level week that we've had for a long time, and really does define UN action going forward. We're in a situation now where there are many who would like to see the UN being weakened, which of course is a reckless act of self-harm. And so we have to push back against this crisis of finance, yes, but also these challenges to our legitimacy and to our confidence. And as the SG has been leading with the UN80 process, there's a sense that change is essential right now, but we're not changing in benign waters. We're changing in the midst of a storm around us. And so what we've realized on the humanitarian side is that we need to grieve for what will go and what has gone. We need to fight for what must be saved, and we must imagine what we can be in the future. And I know that you'll be hearing more on that from the SG in the period to come. For the humanitarian part of this process, as we discussed last time I was here, we are facing this perfect storm. Underfunded, overstretched, under attack. The underfunded bit of it has, if anything, got worse since I was last here. So we've only been funded 19% of what we need, 19, just to be clear, which is a 40% drop on where we were last year. Devastating. Makes it an age of indifference. And as you know, those funding cuts have already meant that we have hyper prioritized our planning in order to target saving 114 million lives, which would cost $29 billion. Just to put that in perspective, that $29 billion is 1% of what the world will spend on defense this year. So what does that mean about the collective priorities? We're overstretched, as you've heard me say before, but just to update the evidence for that, millions now going without essential food, healthcare and protection. Programs to shield particularly women and girls have been slashed. Hundreds of aid organizations across this community have been shut down. The sector as a whole, I would estimate, has shrunk already by a third, even since I took over 10 months ago. It wasn't something I was planning to be saying. And if you listen, as I do, to our leading agencies, UNICEF, an extra 6 million kids are likely to be out of school. WFP are saying they can only reach 1 million of the 3 million Afghans who currently need food. UNHCR are saying that 11 million refugees may no longer get the help that they need. And as Steph often reminds us, we're under attack. Last year, 380 plus aid workers killed, highest ever, 270 already this year. It's a record that I fear will break again. And that violence against us, and I'll come on to Yemen, for example, and of course OPT, Gaza, is somehow being normalized. It's an age of impunity. And so a question that I wish was asked more is, where are these weapons coming from that are killing us and those we serve? They don't come out of nowhere. So what do we do? Well, for the UN, I think about for the humanitarian sector, as we've done, the parameters are, firstly, reform, get the barnacles off the boat, if that's not too English an expression, dealing with the unnecessary layers and processes, duplication and dead weight, then regroup. We've got to build these fresh coalitions around those who really do need what we stand for, those at greatest risk of climate crisis and of conflict and of humanitarian catastrophe, those who most lose out in a strongman world. And then renew. And again, I know the SG will be setting out more ideas on this in the coming period. We've got to have an element of idealism and hope to how we renew, how we build that genuinely global organization, how we ensure that we are saving lives, building resilience, stopping conflict, defending rights, and how we prepare humanity for the impact of climate crisis and artificial intelligence. On the humanitarian reset, we're now well into that implementation phase. That old model is gone. And we mourn the consequences of that for those that we serve, but we won't stick around and be held up from actually then pushing through the changes we need to make sure that we save as many lives as we can with the money that we have. So you'll see more, I hope, direct assistance, cash in people's hands. You'll see women and girls at the heart of the response. Simpler, faster appeals, more local leadership, more responsibility and power closer to the communities that we serve. You'll see us scaling up our pooled funds so that the majority of resources reach local organizations. And you'll see us launching the foundations, laying the foundations for that more radical renewal of the humanitarian mission by 2030. Greener, more anticipatory, more preventive, more efficient, more local. I'll be very brief on the headline country crises because I know that you'll want to dive deeper into those. Gaza OPT, as you hear from Steph, more than 500,000 people face catastrophic hunger. We fear that number could exceed 640,000 by the end of this month. As I said in Geneva, after the last IPC report, it's a preventable, a predictable famine. But we can stop it. Gaza's women, elderly, children can't eat, statements of concern. And a reminder, as so often, during the ceasefire earlier this year, when I was in Gaza, thousands of truckloads of aid entered, proving that we can save lives at scale if humanitarians are allowed to do that. So we need the crossings open, we need functional access, we need unimpeded safe passage inside Gaza, we need the looting to stop, we need the hostages to be released, we need a ceasefire now. And all of this, of course, is against a backdrop where the rules of war are being corroded day by day. We've heard Israeli ministers talking openly about flattening Gaza and forcing people out permanently, bombing food aid, and so on. And I've said consistently, I don't think that we have to choose between condemning the starvation of civilians in Gaza and demanding the unconditional release of hostages. We must do both. We don't have to choose between fighting anti-Semitism and holding Israel to the same laws as everyone else. We must do both. I've just come from a call with our excellent humanitarian coordinator, resident coordinator in OPT. And the simple version of our plan to stop the Gaza famine, ceasefire, hundreds of trucks a day, full access, safe routes, end the bureaucratic delays, restore power and water, and allow commercial traffic. None of that is complicated. Sudan will be a big theme for High Level Week. As you know, largest humanitarian crisis in the world, more than 500,000 people now in famine-like conditions. 30 million people need aid, and sexual violence, as I've been hearing from Sudanese NGOs in the last few days, is rampant. Particular focus on trying to get this siege of El Fasher lifted. 900,000 people there in desperate, desperate need of our life-saving work. That will be a big theme of the coming days. Syria, looking to see how we can use the visit of the president and his team to ensure we've got the right balance in the conversation between the humanitarian imperative and that longer-term development and resilience and reconstruction effort that will allow the people of Syria, as they wish to reduce that dependence on humanitarian aid. So a real moment, I think, another big theme for High Level Week is getting that right. Last couple, Haiti. I was in Haiti last week for 3 days and saw crisis hitting from all sides, the violence, displacement, collapsing services. I do encourage you to read the articles that Jacqueline Charles wrote for the Miami Herald. She was with me for that time, and she can articulate much more eloquently than I can what we saw. The violence has to end. I saw the last functioning hospital in Port-au-Prince pushed to the brink. Real concern over the sustainability of that operation. I met young people trapped by violence but who are finding ways to rebuild their lives. Spoke with many of the IDP families living in the most unthinkable conditions. And most challenging, spent a long meeting with survivors of gender-based violence who have faced just unspeakable and repeated attacks. Quiet courage, but they should not have to be asked to show such courage. So we're doing all we can there. I've just come from a conversation with the team in country, but it's one of the crises alongside DRC and Afghanistan where the funding cuts are hitting hardest, less than 12% of what we need. Afghanistan, I've discussed here before. The challenges. I think I've visited since I last joined you and went to Kandahar, Kunduz, Kabul. Of course, the recent earthquakes have then devastated nearly 500,000 people, claiming thousands of lives, many homes destroyed, livelihoods decimated. And so we have a flash appeal out at the moment to respond to that earthquake. If I can just add, and it may come up later, our female humanitarian workers and the women that we're working with in country are absolutely indispensable to the humanitarian response in Afghanistan. And it is intolerable that they're coming under further pressure, further challenges in the work they are doing. We cannot do our work without them. Finally, Yemen, where again there's been a huge focus in the last 2 weeks really, since those additional detentions of our staff. I've just told the Security Council that it's intolerable that at a time of funding cuts, when we're already facing security threats, that those who are trying to save lives in Yemen are being detained and challenged in this way. Utterly unacceptable, as the SG has said. And I echo, of course, his call for their immediate, unconditional release. Shall I stop there, Steph? Is that too much?
Well, it's too late now. No, it's not too much. Sorry. Edie.
Mr. Fletcher, thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of follow-ups to what you've just said. You started out saying that this is the most significant high-level week and that there were people threatening to see the UN being weakened. Can you tell us what countries, what people, who you see as those people actually trying to destroy the United Nations? Secondly, you said that the humanitarian overall appeal this year was only 19% funded. Could you give us the figure for this year and for last year? And third, one of the big issues is donors. Do you see other countries stepping up to fill in the gap left by the huge cuts in funding from the United States? Thank you.
Please go ahead, Tom.
So I'll let you speculate on who I might be thinking of in terms of this challenge to how the UN operates. Let me say that one thing that struck me in the short time I've been in the job is the amount of support, actually increasingly loud support for what we stand for. And lots of member states stepping forward and saying this isn't an organization that is owned by the big powers, owned by the post-45 Security Council. It's an organization that does belong to all of us and, of course, belongs to our citizens as well. And so I think you're hearing a lot more pushback there against the notion of a sort of strongman, transactional, survival of the fittest world. We know where that leads, and we know why we were created as an institution. And it's unfashionable in a way to be defending institutions at the moment and defending structures and hierarchies and order. But the alternative is disorder and chaos. So we know very clearly why we're here, and we know what we need to be fighting for. On the numbers, so to date this year, 19% received. That's $8.7 billion out of the $45.5 billion requested in the global humanitarian overview that I launched back in December. So that's a 40% drop on last year. I don't have the number for last year, but as Steph would probably tell you, you can probably do the maths from there. You see, I do read all the transcripts, Steph. I'm trying to learn from the master. Remind me. Donors. Well, this is an important point. I think we've recognized as the humanitarian community that the US was footing too high a proportion of the bill. Now, I don't want to see any of that money cut because it has an impact on our life-saving work, but maybe we were over-reliant, whatever it was, 40 to 50% on that donor. And of course, that US money has saved hundreds of millions of lives over a long period. And so I think it's right that we try to share that burden around more fairly. It's obviously a message that we hear loud and clear from the new administration. I've heard it again in the last couple of days.
Thank you. Bisan?
Thank you very much. Bisan Abu Quick with Al Jazeera Arabic. I just want to go back to something that you just said about the attacks against humanitarians and the violence against them, and on Gaza in particular. And you're saying it has become normalized in the age of impunity. And you're asking the question that you would want to hear, where are the arms coming from? On Gaza in particular, where scores of humanitarians have been killed, are you implying that more pressure should be applied on countries for an arms embargo or stop the arming Israel? This is one question. And my second question is, back in May at the Security Council, you called on Security Council members to act decisively to prevent a genocide. You were criticized for using the word genocide, but since then, the International Association of Genocide Scholars have concluded that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. Do you feel vindicated at this point?
So in terms of the attacks on humanitarians, and think of Gaza, of course, in that context, that's where the majority have been, but we've seen it also in recent weeks in Ukraine, where we've lost NGO colleagues. I've mentioned Yemen, Haiti. In all of these crises, we're facing increasing risks. And those weapons are not coming from nowhere, as I say. The weapons that are killing us, our people, who are going out towards the sound of gunfire in order to try and save lives. And so I do want more of a conversation about not just the legal obstacles that should be put in front of the attacks on us, or the sort of sense of impunity, but also physically the damage that's being done to us and to those we serve. Now, I don't know about arms embargoes and those other questions there for the political colleagues, but I don't want my people, our people, to be killed. That goes for the courageous humanitarian workers and those we serve. And they're being killed in increasingly sophisticated ways. That is one of the really alarming things, even in 10 months in this job. Increasing use of lethal autonomous weapons, drones and so on, which are then targeting our installations and our people. And Steph has already talked about, even in the last couple of days, implications of that for some of our properties in Gaza. On those issues that I raised in that Security Council briefing back in May, it's not about me being vindicated or anything else. I think everyone, people are speaking out clearly in public on what needs to change, what we're seeing. It's not for me, again, to get into the legal minutiae of all of this, but we need a ceasefire. We need this to stop. And we must continue to speak out boldly to that effect.
Thanks. Amélie Bottelier from AFP News Agency. You were just in Haiti, and it's a country that have been deprived of a lot of media coverage because a lot of us cannot go there. You've been there, so can you describe what is it to live? How is it to live in Port-au-Prince? I mean, we know that 90 or 95% of the capital is controlled by the gangs, but what does that mean for the population? And what did the population tell you about what they want from the international community, and especially is there any need for this new anti-gang force that the US is now promoting in the Security Council? Thank you.
So they described to me, and you could see it in their eyes, and you'll see it in the videos that we've put out of that trip. I mean, they're just terrified. Moving across Port-au-Prince day to day, utterly terrifying. Going through those checkpoints where you can be abducted, shaken down for money, taken hostage. It's utterly, the Center for Therapeutic Support to Victims of Sexual Violence that I visited at the end of the trip. People talk about the need for that and the way they talk about the need for a pharmacy on the corner or a local school. It's like, well, of course, in our neighborhood, we have a pharmacy, a supermarket, and a center for the victims of sexual violence. And the women I met there describe how they are taking contraception in advance of going through checkpoints because they're anticipating the sexual violence they know they'll face, just going about their daily lives. So the level of brutality from the armed groups, the level of fear is really terrifying. And people want to be heard, they want to be supported. Mostly they ask for dignity. And at the moment, they don't feel they have dignity. And the conditions in the IDP site I visited were, as difficult as any I've seen in the 10 months in this job.